All right, so our math goal for lesson 4.9, part 1 is to compare our shift patterns in our place value chart. So write down everything you know about the patterns on the place value chart and then come back to me. Okay, so here's our place value chart, and hopefully you said if we move to the left, our place values get bigger, right? They are increasing 10 times each time. If we go to the right, our place value chart is decreasing by 1/10 every time. So remember, our tens is worth 10. 100 is worth 2 tens, 10 times 10. 1,000 is worth 3 tens, 10 times 10 times 10 is 1,000. So when we're moving this way, we're increasing by 10 every time. And when we move to the right, we're decreasing by 1/10, 100th, 1,000. So it decreases by 1/10 every time you move over a place value. Okay. All right. So keep that in mind. Let's see if we can answer some questions about it. Okay. So we just looked at our place value chart. What happens when you multiply it by 10? The number gets blank times is great. So multiply by 10, it's getting how many times bigger? If you said 10 times bigger, you are correct. It's increasing by 10. Oh, there it goes. It's increasing by 10. It's getting 10 times bigger. And the digits shift to the, which way do they shift? They shift to the left. That's right. They shift to the left. And how many places are they shifting when you're multiplying by 10? That's right, 1 time. And if we look at our place value chart again, when I multiply by 10, when I'm going from 10, when I'm going from the tens to the hundreds, I'm increasing it, I'm multiplying it by 10. So it's 2 tens. So it's increasing 10 times. If I move to the thousands, I'm increasing it by another 10. Notice here I have 3 tens now instead of the 2, and 2 instead of the 1. So each time I move over, it increases by 1/10. And I'm moving to the left. Moving to the left, and I moved 1 time each time, right? Okay, so let's look at our next one. When I multiply by 100, the number gets what? How many times bigger is it getting when you multiply by 100? Good. If you said 100 times bigger, you are right. And the digits are shifting to the left. Good. And how many places are they shifting when I multiply by 100? 2. Yes, 2, because there's 2 place values in 100, right? If I look at my place value chart, okay, looking at my place value chart, right? When I multiply by 100, I have 2 tens. So every time I multiply by 100, I'm increasing it 100 times, or 2 tens, right? 2 places it's moving over. What happens when I multiply it by 1/10? So now I'm multiplying by 1/10. The number gets what times is great? That's right, it gets 1/10 the size, 1/10, 1/10 times as great. So it's not getting greater, right? It really isn't getting greater. It's actually getting smaller, but we say 1/10 times as great, which is actually smaller. And the digits shift to the right. Good. And how many places are they shifting if I multiply by 1/10? Good, 1 place. And if I look at our place value chart, so let's take a look at our place value chart. Here it is, 1/10, right here, 1/10. It is 1/10 the size. And every time I'm going over, it's like dividing by 10, right? So it's getting 10 times smaller, and or 1/10 the size, we can say. And every time we move over, it gets 1/10 smaller, okay? And when we move to the right, it gets smaller. So what happens when I multiply by 100th? it is getting what? 1 out of 100 times as great, right? So it's getting 100 times smaller, so it's 100 times as great, and the digits shift to the good, right? To the right. And how many places are we shifting? Good, 2 places. Yes, so shifting over 2 places. And if we look at our place value chart, okay, looking at our place value chart here, right? Right here, 100th. So it's 1, 2 places over. So it's like dividing by 10 2 times, divided by 10, divided by 10 2 times. Okay. So it's the opposite. So here's the question. How is multiplying by 10 or 100? How's that like multiplying 1/10 or 100th? So how are they alike and how are they different? So take a moment to write it down in your math notebook, how multiplying by 10 or 100 is like multiplying by 1/10 and 100th, and write down how they are different, then come back to me. All right, so multiplying by 10 or 1/10 will have the same number of shifts, 1 place. So they're both going to shift 1 time. The difference is that when you multiply by 10, it's going to move to the left 1 time. And when you multiply by 1/10, it's going to shift to the right 1 time. Okay. When you multiply by 100 or 100th, you'll have 2 shifts, right? The numbers are going to shift twice. But the difference is that when you multiply it by 100, it's going to shift over 2 times to the left. And when you multiply it by 100th, it's going to shift over 2 places to the right. And so when they shift over to the right, they're going to get smaller. When they shift over to the left, it's going to get bigger depending on what you're multiplying by. If you're multiplying by 10 or 100, you multiply 10, it's going to get 10 times bigger. Multiply by 100, it's going to get 100 times bigger. If you multiply by 1/10, it's going to get 1/10 smaller. If you multiply by 100th, it's going to get 100th times smaller, okay, or as great. So let's look at some of these in some problems. Okay, so let's look at this problem. How will the number shift? So if I'm multiplying here by 10 or 100, I know that they're going to get bigger. In order to get bigger, they got to shift to the left. So all these are going to shift to the left because I know they're going to get bigger. So I know when I know about multiplying by tens, I ignore the 0 and I just multiply 3 and I ignore the decimal, so it's just 36 times 1, which is 36, and then bring back my 0. Now I'm going to add my decimal, 1 decimal place, so it just becomes 36. So notice 3.6 becomes 36. It is bigger because they shifted over 1 place to the left. About 36 times 100, same thing. I'm going to ignore the zeros and the decimal. It's just 36 times 1, which is 36. Then I'm going to add in my 2 zeros from the 100. I have 1 place value, so it goes right here. So it's 360. So did it increase? Yes, it increased 100 times. It got 100 times bigger, and the 3.6, the 3 shifted over 2 places, the 6 shifted over 2 places, and that gave us 360. So remember, the numbers are the ones that are shifting, not the decimals. It's just a shortcut, okay? So what's going to happen if we multiply by 1/10 or 100th? They should get smaller, right? Because you're taking a part of a part, and they're going to shift to the right. So these are going to shift to the right, and this is going to get 10 times smaller, and this is going to get 100 times smaller. So what's going to be 1/10 the value? So again, I'm going to ignore the decimals. It's just 36 times 1, which is what? 36. Count my decimal places. 1, 2 places. So 1, 2. Here's my decimal now. So this becomes 3600. So it got smaller. Notice it got smaller, right? They shifted. So the 6 shifted over and the 3 shifted over. So the 3 shifted here and the 6 shifted there. So it became my 3,600. Now let's look to see what happens when we multiply by 100th, right? So multiply by 100th, I'm going to ignore the decimals. It's just 36 times 1, which is still 36. I got to count my decimal places. 1, 2, 3. Add my decimal. 1, 2, 3. Decimal is going to go there, so I got to add a 0 to hold its place there. So it becomes 36 thousandths. So did it decrease from 3.6? Yes, it decreased. The number shifted over 2 places. So the 3 shifted over 1, 2, and the 6 shifted over 1, 2, which gave me my 36 thousandths. All right. Okay, so you try some. How will the number shift? Okay, so if you multiply by 10, what's going to happen? Right, it should increase by 10, right? And what happens when you multiply it by 100? It should become 100 times bigger, right? 1.7 times 100 will become 100 times bigger. And then 2.49 times 1/10, it should get what? 1/10 smaller. So they're going to shift one place. And if you multiply it by 100th, what's going to happen to the 5.6? It's going to shift how many times? 2, right? 2 times. It's going to become 100 times smaller. So go ahead and try those and see what you get, and then we'll compare answers. Okay, so you should have said that these are going to shift to the left, right? And this one shifted over 1 time. So 48 times 10 is just 48, and my 0. 2 shifts, 1, 2. There are my shifts. Then 1.7 times 100. I ignore the decimals, just 17 times 100, which is 17. Add my 2 zeros, 1 shift becomes 170. Notice 1.7 is 100 times bigger now, it's 170. And 4.8 is 10 times bigger. Not 4.8, sorry, 48 hundredths becomes 10 times bigger and it becomes 4.8. And they all move to the left. Notice how this one moved over 1 place here, and then the 8 moved over 1 place here. It moved over 2 places, right? You got 2, so the 1 moved over 1, 2, and the 7 moved over 1, 2, and that gave me the 170. Now, when I multiply by a 10th or 100th, notice it became smaller, right? Because I'm taking a part of a part. So I ignored, I just 249 times 1, which is what? 249. How many shifts? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 249 thousandths. Notice it became 1/10 smaller. They all shifted 1 place over. The 9 shifted over to the thousands, the 4 shifted to the hundreds, and the 2 shifted over to the tenths. Okay. And what happened when I multiplied by 100th? I had 100 times smaller, right? So I ignore the decimal, it's just 56 times 1, which is 56, but I have 1, 2, 3 decimals. So I had to do 1, 2, 3. I had to add a 0. So notice that this one shifted twice. It's telling me 2 shifts. So the 6 shifted over 1, 2. The 5 shifted over 1, 2. And that gave me my 56 thousandths. All right. So write down what you learned. Do a proof of learning by solving a problem. So maybe multiply 1 by 10 and then the other one by 1/10 and notice what happens. Or multiply it by 100 and 100ths and see what happens. And then write a reflection or a question. And that's the end of our lesson. All right. Have a good day.